Naija, which way now?
Welcome to the maiden edition of My Better Niger, brought to you by the Initiative for Good and Informed Citizenship, also known as Rescue Nigeria. Today's episode is titled The High Cost of Public Governance in Nigeria. Nigeria is often referred to as the giant of Africa, but when it comes to governance, it might also be one of the most extravagant. Despite its vast human and natural resources, Nigeria continues to grapple with economic stagnation, widespread poverty, and poor infrastructure, while public governance remains a major financial burden on the nation. In this episode, we will analyze the cost of governance in Nigeria, why it is so high, the impact, and what we can do about it. Let's look at the numbers because numbers don't lie. Nigeria has one of the most expensive governance structures in the world. According to reports, about 70% of the annual budget goes to recurrent expenditures, such as in salaries, allowances, and packs for political office holders and public servants. While all this is going on, we are not able to deliver public infrastructure, roads, hospitals, schools, infrastructure to the population. Nigerian lawmakers rank among the highest paid legislators globally. A senator earns around $450,000 every year in a country where the minimum wage is barely $30 per month. The Nigerian presidency maintains a bloated budget with allocations for luxury vehicles, airplanes, foreign travels, and the maintenance of the presidential villa running into billions of naira. Nigeria has over 500 government agencies, many of which have overlapping functions. They got billions of naira in operational costs. To examine this topic are two guests and informed citizens of Nigeria. Maureen Keru is a charity consultant and leadership coach. James Adekunle Aderoju Jaga, also known as Jaga of Nigeria, is a consulting architect. So the first question goes to you, Jaga. Why
Okay.
is governance so expensive in Nigeria compared to other countries?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Odediwa. So, I'm glad that's the first question we are asking. In other words, uh, to solve any problem, in my opinion, I think we should do the diagnosis, do the serious critique, and then proffer a solution. So, the question is, why is governance so expensive in our country, our dear country, Nigeria? If we start with the truth, the cost of governance is not only high because of complexity, it is high, in my opinion, because of greed.
Yeah.
I think the average Nigerian, especially our leaders, the greed is just so up there now that everybody wants to just gobble everything up for their individual satisfaction.
Yeah.
So another reason would be waste.
Mm.
The other reason would be the myth of politics is about reward,
Mm.
not necessarily responsibility. Leadership is about responsibility. Also, we have uh, really, just like the Mr. Dedron's introduction, way too excessive appointments. You know, you've got ministers under ministers. There's a a minister and there's another minister. I've been out of Nigeria for a minute, so I may not necessarily know the lingo. I mean, you get
Minister of
advisors,
State.
right? Exactly. You get advisors with advisors advising them, and special assistants to the senior special assistant. I mean, you look at all these things, and it looks like it'll be funny if it's not real, if it's not affecting our people uh, uh, in such a devastating way. Our infrastructure is just, as an architect, I can tell you, it's just really almost out of word of knowing how to describe it. So essentially, some of these things are just, and of course, maybe the first thing most of us will mention is the corruption. It's in plain sight.
Yeah.
Essentially, the more corrupt you are,
Mm.
and not to be political, and just join us, and your sins are forgiven. You know, so it's pretty much a smorgasbord, almost like an all-you-can-eat buffet table where there is no oversight. You know, we have a situation where the presiding officer at a hearing says, if you're against it, say no. Everybody say no. If you're for it, say yes. And there's this quiet. And the presiding officer says the ayes have it. It's almost like, in my conclusion, I will really, really like the elite, to have a consensus. The way that any country can, essentially make it, a developing country. There's some of the advanced countries where we all live, they started somehow, some way. So this is the impact of history. When you go and look at it, they were really poor. Americans were lining up for food in the 30s, and we also in current times, you can see that when there's a controversy, the elites know how to come in, and once the elites start talking, boom, as we say, in America, things will change. The government will respond to it. It seems like in Nigeria, most of the time, I just call them elitists, not real elites, because the elites of a society, they should be the one driving and pushing, the guys in power, the government. But in our case, it's just so far it's quite unfortunate. You what else can I think of? You
Yeah, like
have
we can talk about the solutions later on. You,
later
you
on.
identified greed, corruption, and saw such other factors as being the elemental background for the
Correct.
situation we face. Uh,
Correct.
Maureen, do you have anything to add? Why is
Um,
this so expensive
because
to
of
run?
time, I would just say, not to echo what James have said. We have an oversized and overindulgent government where people are just selfish and they're in for status rather than for service. And so when you have people with that kind of mindset, they're there to line their pockets. And that's why it's expensive. Governance in itself is not expensive. It's the people who are doing the governance that are expensive. They've got expensive taste. And it's a slap on the
Mhm.
face of the ordinary citizen of our country, where you have a government where they would come in, they swear to serve the nation, but they go actually to enslave the nation. I mean, let's talk specifics here. I was listening to Adeola Fayehun the other day,
Yeah.
stating that the government is thinking of spending 10 billion naira for solar power for Aso Villa. And I'm thinking, how can you expect the citizens to sit in darkness and you're spending 10 billion naira? Where's the justification for that? How can you justify that kind of expense? So we're talking about greed here. We're talking about overindulgence of our leaders. That's the reason why governance is so expensive in Nigeria, because the people in power are greedy. and they have expensive tastes. And of course, they are now enslaving the people to provide luxury for themselves. So they're feeding their luxurious lifestyle rather than, making sure that the ordinary citizen has what rightfully belongs to them.
Thank you. Yeah, it's got to be so because a Nigerian national legislator makes more than the United States president, far more than the president of many of the developed nations in the world. And after Nigerian legislators come the Kenyan legislature. So those are the two most well-paid uh, legislators in the world. So it's got to be so. But if this is the case, and I believe this is the case, what's the impact of having such a bloated government in Nigeria? And this question is to you, Maury.
You only need to visit Nigeria to see the impact on the ordinary citizen of Nigeria. The road leading from Ore to Ondo town, my town, has been in disrepair since God knows when, and it's getting worse. We've had change of government how many times, and that road has not been fixed. How else are the people paying for it? The school system is not working. The other day, well, some years ago, I went home. My parents have tenants. And I was saying to my mom, I said, I can see school children with a particular tenant. And my mom said, they don't teach them anymore. The teachers don't pay the teachers' salary. So what the teachers do is make the students work for them. Can you imagine? The students come home to help the teacher to wash her clothes, to help on the farm. Why? Because the teachers are not paid. And so what the teachers do, instead of teaching the children, the children are now paying the salary that the government is supposed to pay. And how are they paying it? In servitude to the teachers. That is just two examples of the price, the expensive price that the average Nigerian is paying because of our poor governance and expensive governance. So the government, being overindulgent and excessive in their expenses, are slapping the ordinary Nigerians in the face. It's an insult to our intelligence and our common sense to tell us that you're spending 10 billion naira for solar power for Aso Villa, and we are expected to suffer epileptic power supply. What's wrong with the generators that the ordinary Nigerians are using? Why can they not use the generators that other people are using? How can you justify that kind of expense? It is a slap on our faces, and it must stop. That's the impact of excessive governance that it's having. That's the impact it's having on the average Nigerian. Lack of basic needs.
Thank you. And so the average Nigerian, the common man, is definitely suffering. You only have to be on the street for 10 minutes to see what's going on. James, what's your take on this?
If I may add something else to why the cost of governance is so high, this may not sound as if it's important, but it is. Because when you have 700 something local governments, 36 states, according to the introduction, about 500 plus agencies, all of these guys are consuming, they are taking. But essentially, production in Nigeria is next to zero. Nobody's producing anything. Somebody like me from Oyo State, I remember when we used to go back home to the village, almost everywhere you look, there are farmers everywhere. You can just see the activities. In the 80s, I did my NYC in Bauchi, I know places like Alkaleri. I drove to Bill, you know, close to where the girls were picked up. All these places you can drive around way back in the day. You can see at the Bauchi local government where I actually served, you know, I served at the Department of Works and Housing. They have tractors that, you know, farmers come to get those tractors. I don't know if they pay for it, if it was free, but right now, I'm not sure how we get to this idea of fintech mentality. Like everybody just wants to share money without producing anything. I don't. So that is part of where the government and the elites, the political elites, have to shift their orientation to producing things. You cannot not produce stuff and expect, you know, you're just taking 70% of the budget is for salaries. Of course, the cost of governance is going to be high. As far as the impact, I think I scribbled a few points here. The number one of it for me is the children out of school. We don't have good data, but when you're looking at millions, you know, sometimes it's the IMF or World Bank that will tell us, oh, in Nigeria, there are about 12 million children out of school. It's actions have consequences. You know, those monies that are being spent to do X, Y, and Z for the comfort of the elite, the political elite, it almost directly translates to why you have so many children out of school. That should be illegal. You cannot have a child of under 18 in most advanced countries not in school. Is it that the parents is going to be responsible for it or somebody is going to be responsible for it? So some of these things, I'm not sure why we're in a situation where Nigeria, where it's almost like there's a shame, the death of shame, as the way I would put it when I'm writing. Another thing is the healthcare system. We have a situation where when I see videos, sometimes it's so appalling. Something as basic as an ambulance to take you to the hospital is nowhere in Nigeria. Roads, again, speaking of roads, I can tell you that as far as global standards, 99% of Nigerian roads is a failure from design to construction. Forget about the corruption. You know, I talk to my friends, you know, old classmates, you know, they travel and visit here. And I said, why is it that when I go home and look at the drawings, the design, that's not corruption. The design, so there's a level of incompetence that's permeated Nigeria in the past 2 decades or so, 2.5 decades. The level of education is so unbelievable. So we have a serious problem on our hands, you know, if I may tell you. So as far as the impact, to recap, I said the children, for me, healthcare, and one word, infrastructure, you know, which will include roads, electricity, water. As a matter of fact, infrastructure is what makes citizenship. You know, I can write a whole book about that. When you have infrastructure that somebody from Akaleri in Bauchi can connect somebody in Bukuru, Jos. I mean, I know Nigeria a lot, you know, very well, you know, all 4 corners. You hear the elite say, oh, we'll privatize. You cannot privatize what's not there. The government have to be the one that spend that money. That 70% that we're talking about needs to be trimmed down to like 15%. And that money should be poured into rural electrification, construction of roads, you know, that's going to help people to move. So essentially, when you hear the elite say it's like a whataboutism, you know, it's happening in America too. Yeah, what's happening in America? Privatization, they don't stop privatization upon nothing. You cannot privatize what's not there. There's nobody, a private guy, well, don't let me say nobody. 99% of people that have money, that work for it, will not help you construct the road from Maya in the Barakwa to Okeogun or from Wari to Sapele. That's the government's job. It's when you have those things in place, then you can now say, hey, you money guys, can you take over this road and make it a toll road? But to do the initial construction, that's the government's job. And all that money that people are lavishing on silly stuff, those are the money. That's the impact. Those are the monies that should and must be used for those infrastructure. If I may leave it there for now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, you said so much. But we are going to be wrapping up now. We've looked at why the government is so expensive. We've looked at the impact on the society. But what's the way forward? What's your better Nigeria looking like? How do we overcome these challenges? How do we set ourselves on the path of national development? And this question starts with you, Maury.
What's the solution? What's the way forward? I think first and foremost, we need to confront this culture of excess. Why do they need all these things? It's not justifiable. I keep talking about this 10 million naira thing, billion rather, because it's the latest, most stupid suggestion that has just been given, to put solar power. And what makes me so angry about this is the fact that Nigeria is proposing a ban on solar power. So how can you justify Aso Villa having solar power when you're thinking of banning it? And the story behind it, allegedly, is that people who are bringing in generators into the country are robbing the palms of the powers that be. And so that's a stream of income for corruption. So we need to face this excess head on. This culture of excess has to stop. It has to stop. Secondly, we need structural reforms. Streamline ministries. You said it in your introduction. Ministers have ministers and ministers and ministers. Why do we need those layers? Why do we need them? They cannot justify it. We need to eliminate these duplications in the ministries, because these are salaries and people will get promoted, they will get perks, they will also have their own luxury allowances. How can we justify that? The other day, in Ibadan and a few other places, there was a stampede and children died because they were looking for free food. And yet, they can justify 10 billion naira for solar power. It is a crime that should be punishable by life imprisonment. And thirdly, we must hit corruption head on. There is no accountability in our country. This is it. Nobody, the government cannot be held accountable. It's I'm looking for the right word, because we are not in democracy. Please, we should not kid ourselves to think that Nigeria has a democratic government. It is a lie. It does not have a democratic government, because you would say people voted you in. We know that the election is always rigged in Nigeria. Anyway, you've already given money to people who are going to vote for you, and we have ghost voters anyway. So the way forward, how are we going to get our government to be accountable? I don't know, but that is it. Accountability. Government should lead by example, which is not existing in Nigeria. It looks like it's when James was speaking, he said other countries that we can learn from, they started from somewhere. After the Great Depression, America rose out of it. Nigeria can rise out of it, but there is no accountability. So the three things: we need to confront our culture of excess. We need structural reforms to streamline our ministries, and we must tackle corruption head on. How we are going to do it, I don't know. But we need transparency. We need accountability. Our leaders. And you see, what pains me is when you look at all these people, they've done MBA, they've got PhDs. Please, what did they learn in those universities? I don't know. Maybe they bought their certificates. Because if they actually went through school, I don't think they can say that anything they're practicing right now is what they learned. And it just goes to show that people are not leading from the heart. They're leading from their heads. They're leading from their greed. But until we tackle these three things that I have spoken about, which is the culture of excess, structural reform, and accountability, making sure our government is accountable, we're still going to be in this mess.
Thank you so much. That's a lot loaded pack there. We can see how your better Nigeria looks. Over to you, James. What's your better Nigeria looking like?
Well, thank you very much. I would say the first thing that should happen, I mean, this is very difficult because evidently the government officials, they are the ones enjoying what seems to be bringing the negative to our people. But the first thing I would say is that we should slash the size of government in Nigeria. There is no reason why we need all those, 40-something ministries in counting. There's an Oransaye, I think that's the way you pronounce that name, Oransaye report, that I read it twice now. Again, this guy's in government. Are they going to allow these things? Just like Lady Maureen just said, how do we get them to do these things? How do we get them to implement something like the Oransaye report? They need to scrap a lot of agencies, combine them if they are that necessary. I mean, for goodness sake, Nigeria should not have more than between 10 and 12 ministries, really, the federal government. And that should be probably repeated in the states. So that's my number one thing, slash the government, big slash. Of course, the guys in power now, they're going to be the one that will have to do it. So the elites is going to have to push them. We're going to have to be on top of them. Criticism is actually an act of patriotism, in my opinion. I'm talking constructive criticism, suggesting ideas, if they will hear it, rather than arresting people or trying to lock people up. So that's my number one thing. The second thing is I will peg the salaries of government officials. As politicians, the mathematicians should come out and use the baseline, the 70,000 minimum wage. Use that just to post it. I mean, since we always talk about, it's happening in America too. It's happening in this too, and that's happening in that too. There's a way you can actually figure out all these things, whereby the minimum wage of a country to the president. Okay, these are things that I've done in the past. If you look at the minimum wage or the average GDP per capita of the United States, for instance, you can juxtapose it with the highest government official, who is the president. Our mathematicians, our elites should start thinking that way, putting it out there, getting on this guy's case, because again, they are the government officials are the ones that are benefiting from the rot. So I'm not going to tell you that they're going to want to change it without people being on top of them. So it's part of our job is to be suggesting these things, educating our people to, you know, go about pounding these ideas. So that's the second thing. Make sure the salaries are commensurate with what they enact. They enacted a minimum wage. You cannot have a situation where a senator of Nigeria is making more than U.S. president. You know, in a situation where the GDP per capita is about $2,000, if that, and the GDP per capita of America is about 85,000. So it just doesn't make any sense. But somebody needs to be on top of this, guys. Beyond, people that have access to the media, they have to be saying these things every day. My number 3 thing, again, since we're trying to copy America, would be to devolve power. They're talking about this restructuring, this talk about restructuring. Hopefully, we're seeing movements. Maybe this current administration will do it. You need to devolve power. The power in the center in Abuja is way too much. So, for the governors and the local government people to be able, for us to be able to hold them accountable, you have to give them the responsibility, not just on paper. Because when you have somebody in your local government who is corrupt, it becomes personal. You know them. You can go to their family house. You can't. Local government money, if somebody embezzled it, people can just straight from the village go to but we all know how difficult it is to get into people in Abuja, talk less of the states. So the number 3 thing that I will have is to devolve power, which is the language of Nigeria is restructuring. And of course, the last thing is not the most important as far as I'm concerned, because I think we need to do a lot of raw, not non-high-tech things in Nigeria before we start going with all this computer stuff. But if we can digitize procurement, digitize payroll, digitize oversight, which is really next to zero now, and let the algorithms do the auditing, and then post these things. As you introduced me, what I do here is mainly infrastructure. At any construction site, federal money, state money, county money, local government money, the first thing you see at the entrance of the site is where all the money comes from. United States government put X number for this road. State government put X number. Local government has this X number. So, and then you will see it. The public can see it. It's on the signboard. It's one of those preliminary things that you do before you do any construction. So you know where the money is coming from. You know who is paying who, how much is. So if we can digitize that so that I can log in, I can challenge you right now to try and log into almost any of the Nigerian ministries. And it will be very difficult for you to find any legitimate, solid information. Okay? On the other hand, again, the countries that they will always say, oh, it's happening in America too. So if it's happening in all these places, and for goodness sake, the Yorubas will say the pap, the white pap, comes from the black pot. So if we are from Nigeria, how is it that we're able to do it here? So, and this is where this is about really patriotism and love of country. The elites must decide that is it okay? Is it just the Oyinbo people that have the right to have paved roads, pipe-borne water, all this infrastructure? Is it the Oyinbo people that have those rights? Once you decide that we Nigerians are human beings too, and we're supposed to be able to have all these amenities, these things are not just good for Oyinbo people alone. Once we have that mindset then all this wasting of money for personal and personal greed, I think would diminish a little bit. So it's again, without going too much, I'm going to leave it there. If we have a closing statement, fine. If we don't, I will use that, what I just said, as my closing statement.
All right, great. So, yeah, thank you so much. That's loaded, that's packed. I think we are all in agreement here that the high cost of governance in Nigeria is a major impediment to national development. And I heard both of you saying and listing some of the things that can be done, how Nigeria can be made to look and work better, that we should tame the culture of excess. We should execute structural reforms. We should hit corruption head on. And I think both of you said one thing in different ways. Maureen, you said there should be accountability in government. And James, you talked about digitizing governance, ensuring there is transparency,
Mhm.
and
Right.
that both in procurement, in payments, in
Mm.
all the various things that make up a government, the people should know who
Be
is
able
paying
to
for
just
what,
log in
how
and
it's
to be
being
able to see
spent,
it.
what's coming in, what's going out,
Oh, yeah.
who is
Correct.
taking what. Because
Right.
at the end of the
You
day,
know,
the money belongs
our
to the
money.
people. Right.
There we go.
So that's great. We know what your better Nigeria looks like. In very short statements, what do we take away from each of you? I start with you, Maury. What's your takeaway?
Right. I would say reducing the cost of governance is not a luxury, it's a necessity and is a right for every Nigerian. We need leaders who walk the talk, not just talk, but they walk the talk. They lead by example. Policies that will serve the citizens, not starve the citizens. A system that prioritizes development over decadence. Nigeria can do better, but it starts with holding power accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Holding power accountable. And over to you, James.
Hey, my closest statement, I think I've touched on it a couple of times. It's really to speak directly to the Nigerian elite. The elites should, through various already existing platforms, should just please come to a consensus that starts with the fact that we Nigerians deserve this modern infrastructure. We deserve not to have 90% of our country looking like dust. Do you know that in America it is illegal to see brown soil around your house?
Um,
These things don't happen by accident. There are laws guiding it. You have to pivot or plant grass. Guess what? There are a lot of things that the elites see when they travel. They just have to decide that those things that they have in their houses overseas, our people deserve it. And I'm telling you, the things that I'm talking about may sound minuscule. As a matter of fact, I'll tell some people, I'm sorry, this is a closing statement, but I'll give you an example. I tell somebody, I say, you need to pave and do landscaping. I see all these big edifices, maybe because this is my job. I'm more of the built environment. So I see a big old train station in Ibadan, in Abeokuta, and I see all the surrounding. The drawing, they'll show you all the landscaping is not looking nice and everything. But when they finish it, everything that's around it is mud. So the elites needs to decide all those things that should be done looking like Ilu, those are things that create jobs, good jobs. So basically, my closing statement is to beg the elites of Nigeria, a house that consumes not 70% of its earnings on furniture, entertainment, dancing, partying, and its children are starving, that house will eventually fall. Okay? So you want to preserve a legacy, preserve Nigeria first. Okay? A country will not endure by charity, it will endure by courage. I thank you. I'll leave it
Wow.
like that.
Thank you so much, both of you. We really appreciate your coming on. By the way, this is the maiden edition of our podcast, My Better
Amazing.
Niger. And we are so glad to have you here today. We hope that when people hear all of this, it will
Mm,
get them thinking and
yes.
will get them doing something, because
Mm,
all we are about at Rescue Nigeria is to get Nigerians to start doing something.
mm,
People can no longer sit on the sidelines.
mm,
They
mm,
must start to do something about the situation they find themselves
mm,
in. Thank you once again,
mm,
Ms. Mori Keru, who is a charity consultant and leadership coach, and also Mr. James Adekunle Aderoju, who is a consulting architect. We hope to see you again here soon. Thank you so much.
Niger, which way now?